There are 10,000 ways to die in the 41st millennium, but only one way to truly vanish, to be swallowed whole by the madness between realities. Gojo Satoru had faced monsters, curses, and gods that mimicked human despair. Yet the storm that tore through existence itself was unlike anything his limitless technique had ever touched. Infinity trembled. Space folded in on itself like a dying star. He was in the middle of a mission, or had been. One moment, the Tokyo skyline shimmered under his gaze. The next, the air screamed. The veil between universes thinned, and Gojo felt something ancient, malicious, and infinite staring back at him. It wasn't cursed energy. It wasn't anything alive. It was the warp. He laughed softly, the sound swallowed by the shrieking void. Guess even infinity has a limit. Then everything broke. The warp was not a place, it was emotion made flesh, madness given form. It coiled around him in iridescent waves, colors beyond comprehension. Screams echoed from every direction, and phantasmal shapes clawed at the edges of his perception. The domain of chaos hungered for him, drawn to his impossible power like moths to a burning sun. He raised his hand, instinctively invoking limitless. The air froze, the warp's tides hesitated, colliding against the unbreakable wall of infinity. Reality rippled in protest. Demons howled. He felt every psychic thread straining to unravel him. "You can't touch me," he whispered, "not while I'm me." But even Gojo Satoru, strongest of his world, could feel the pressure. His eyes, the six eyes, registered impossible data, spatial anomalies stacked on top of themselves, entropy values beyond infinity. He realized for the first time that he was not the apex here. Then came the impact. A gravitational wave slammed through the warp like the detonation of a dying star. Gojo's form was torn from the immaterial sea and hurled into the cold void of real space. When he awoke, the stars above were dim, lifeless pinpricks against a sea of black smoke. Towers of bone and metal rose like jagged teeth. He lay amidst the ruins of what seemed to be a battlefield, scorched banners, shattered lasguns, and the smoldering carcass of a tank marked with a double-headed eagle. Gojo blinked, rubbing dust from his hair. Doesn't look like Shibuya anymore. Something moved in the shadows. Armored figures, faces hidden behind rebreather masks and dull helmets, surrounded him. Their weapons, crude by his standards, yet humming with lethal intent, all pointed at his chest. "Identify yourself," one barked. "You've appeared from the warp. By the Emperor's decree, you are under arrest." Gojo tilted his head, smiling beneath his blindfold. "The Emperor? Sounds fancy. You think he'll be mad I crashed his party?" "Silence, heretic!" Bolters cocked. He could sense the tension, fear layered beneath duty. These men were soldiers, hardened and disciplined, yet they trembled in his presence. To them, his power was blasphemy made flesh. He could feel their emotions, faint ripples in the air, resonating with his cursed energy. Beneath the grime and grit, he saw flickers of humanity, courage, exhaustion, dread. Gojo sighed. Relax. If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't be standing here talking. The nearest guardsman stepped forward, Auspex device buzzing violently. Sir, his psychic signature, it's off the charts. He's not human. Gojo chuckled. Depends on your definition. Then, before anyone could react, a new presence cut through the air, sharp, commanding, and heavy with authority. From beyond the soldiers strode a figure in a long coat of crimson and gold, bearing the sigil of the Inquisition. An inquisitor. Her gaze was cold, unflinching. By the authority of the Holy Ordos, you will kneel, Psyker. You stand before the judgment of the Emperor's chosen. Gojo's smile didn't fade. Kneel? Sorry, I don't really do that. For a heartbeat, silence hung between them. Then the Inquisitor raised her hand, and the world exploded in light. Psykers hidden among the guard unleashed a focused blast of psychic energy. The ground shattered, flames erupted, warp echoes screamed. Gojo didn't flinch. The moment the attack neared him, it simply stopped, frozen, suspended in mid-air, each molecule held in perfect, eternal stillness. Infinity, he murmured. He walked through the storm untouched, hands in his pockets. You should be careful playing with power you don't understand. The last guy who tried burned out his soul. The Inquisitor's expression hardened. Then we'll see if you bleed, demon. Gojo tilted his head slightly, his blindfold glinting in the firelight. Demon, huh? Guess we'll have to test that theory. The warp shimmered faintly around him again, like a veil whispering his name. Somewhere, something vast stirred, something watching. And for the first time since entering this new universe, Gojo felt the faintest chill trace down his spine. If you crave more tales from the Dark Millennium, smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who support the channel. The story plunges deeper into the madness. Smoke drifted through the ruins like ghosts that refused to die. The Inquisitor's strike team kept their rifles trained on Gojo, though none dared take another shot. Every weapon, every psyker's mind, every mechanical servo twitched with fear. Gojo stood still, untouched, hands in his pockets, as if the chaos of a battlefield was little more than an inconvenience. The heat shimmered around him, unable to cross the infinitesimal gap that defined his technique. Infinity was absolute. But this wasn't his world. He could feel it, the oppressive pressure in the air, the faint psychic hum like static at the back of his skull. It wasn't cursed energy. It was something fouler, older, a storm of thought and emotion bleeding into reality. It whispered promises and threats in 100 voices. The warp. Gojo tilted his head upward, scanning the dim sky. Great vessels loomed above the clouds, distant silhouettes like titans hanging over a dying world. Their presence was suffocating. So this is the Imperium, he thought. An empire too massive to comprehend and too broken to change. The Inquisitor spoke again, voice tight but unwavering. "Psyker, state your name and allegiance." "Gojo Satoru," he said, flashing a grin. "Affiliation? Freelance, I guess." Her eyes narrowed. "There is no freelance in the Imperium. You are either of the Emperor or against him. Which is it?" He chuckled softly. "I'm starting to think you people don't do nuance." At that, one of the soldiers whispered a prayer under his breath. The others followed, murmuring words to the God Emperor, clutching their aquilas like talismans. Gojo sighed. "Okay, fine. Let's start over. I'm not your enemy. I was dragged here by something. Call it a dimensional rift, if you like. I'm just trying to figure out where here is." The Inquisitor didn't relax. "The warp does not simply drag mortals, it consumes them. You are a psyker of unclassified magnitude, an anomaly. If you are not a demon, then you are its tool." A faint smirk played on Gojo's lips. "You talk like you've never seen someone stronger than you." She said quietly, "I have, and they are all dead." For the first time, Gojo felt an odd respect for her. This woman had looked into the abyss and never blinked. He raised his hand, and for a moment the soldiers tensed again, but all he did was trace a small circle in the air. The faint blue shimmer of cursed energy rippled outward. Instantly, every Auspex device in the vicinity went haywire. Vox units screamed with interference. The ground trembled. Gojo tilted his head. "You sense that? Your world's field reacts weirdly with my energy. It's like oil and water." The Inquisitor clenched her jaw. "You will cease your sorcery at once." "Or what?" Before she could answer, the earth shook again, but not from Gojo. The horizon ignited with artillery fire. Massive cannons thundered, and the air filled with the droning roar of engines. A mechanized column advanced through the ruins. Imperial Guard reinforcements, their tanks bearing the sigil of the Cadian 122nd. The Inquisitor turned sharply. By the throne, Tyrannide spores on the approach vector. We're out of time. Gojo frowned. Tyrannide? A shadow passed overhead, a grotesque silhouette with too many limbs and not enough mercy. The alien shrieked, its carapace glistening in the half-light. Gojo's grin widened. Now that looks interesting. The Tyrannides descended in a swarm, claws slicing through steel, acid spitting from their maws. The guardsmen opened fire, laser guns flashing in disciplined volleys, heavy bolters thundering from the rear. Gojo watched as disciplined chaos unfolded. The Imperial Guard fought like a machine made of flesh and faith. Every soldier moved with grim efficiency. No heroics, no retreat, just relentless, methodical fire. Competence in the face of despair, he thought. Gotta respect that. The Inquisitor barked orders, her voice cutting through the cacophony. Hold the line! Plasma squads, burn them down! Gojo turned to her. You look busy. Mind if I help? Stay where you are, Psyker. Too late. Gojo stepped forward. In a single motion, he removed his blindfold.
The world slowed. The six eyes opened fully, perception expanding beyond comprehension. Every particle, every photon, every gravitational distortion, he saw it all. A tyrannide warrior lunged at him, screeching. Its claws froze mid-strike, trapped in a web of infinite distance. Gojo's voice was calm. "You've crossed into infinity." He flicked his finger. The creature imploded. Dozens more followed, bounding, slashing, spitting acid, but none came close. The ground before Gojo was a shimmering horizon of stillness. Laze bolts and chitin fragments hung motionless in the air like glass suspended in time. The guardsmen stopped firing, staring in disbelief. The Inquisitor's breath caught. "Holy Throne!" Gojo turned his head, eyes glinting. "You're welcome." Then, with a casual gesture, he released the energy. The air detonated outward, a flash of blue light and silence. When the dust cleared, nothing remained of the tyrannide swarm but scorched earth and drifting ash. The guardsmen gaped. One whispered, "Is he a saint?" The Inquisitor didn't answer. Her mind raced. Power like this, beyond any psyker classification, beyond even sanctioned alpha levels. If the Ordos learned of this man, they would demand his capture, his dissection, his soul. But as she looked at him, standing there, hands in his pockets, smiling like a god among mortals, she wondered if he could even be contained. As the guns fell silent, Gojo turned to her and said lightly, "So, still think I'm a demon?" Her eyes met his. "I think you're something far worse, something this galaxy will not understand." He smiled. "Good, then I'll fit in right in." In the distance the Vox crackled, a message from orbit. "Inquisitor Sarah Valen, report. The Ordos demand your update. Has the anomaly been secured?" Her expression darkened. She looked at Gojo, then at the horizon burning with alien fire. She keyed her Vox. "Negative. The anomaly cannot be secured." Still with us in the darkness? Hit that like button if this tale chills your soul. The story is only beginning, and the warp is watching. The wind carried the scent of burned chitin and ionized blood. The battlefield lay still, not silent, but stunned. The Imperial Guard survivors busied themselves with the aftermath, retrieving ammunition, checking for wounded, reciting litanies of survival. Above them, the sky pulsed with red lightning from the lingering warp storm that had birthed their strange ally. Inquisitor Sarah Valen stood a few meters from Gojo Satoru, watching him with the intensity of a hawk assessing an apex predator. She said at last, her voice low, "You fight like a god, and that terrifies me." Gojo laughed softly. "You say that like it's a bad thing. For humanity, it usually is." He turned, eyes narrowing behind his blindfold. "You don't trust me." "I don't trust anyone who can bend reality by blinking." She holstered her bolt pistol, but didn't relax. "If what you say is true, that you were pulled here, then you are a psyker beyond anything recorded, which means you're also a threat beyond measure." Gojo stretched, glancing up at the broken sky. Threat, hero, anomaly, depends who's keeping score. Her vox bead crackled again. Inquisitor Valen, this is the command ship Harrow's Oath. Acolyte Karen reporting. The anomaly's signature is destabilizing the sector's astropathic network. The Ordos demands containment now. Sarah exhaled. Understood. Prepare extraction coordinates. She cut the line and faced Gojo. You're coming with me. Are you? Yes, the Inquisition will decide your fate. Gojo tilted his head. You realize that sounds like an invitation to a bad time. You don't have a choice. He chuckled, then stepped closer, closing the infinite distance between them in a single movement. The air around him folded like liquid glass. Sarah's soldiers instinctively raised their rifles, but Gojo only smiled. Everything's a choice, Valen. Even survival. Before she could answer, a ripple passed through the air. Every psychic-sensitive soldier froze. Gojo's smile faltered slightly as he sensed it too. Something vast, malicious, probing. The warp was staring back. In orbit above the planet, the Harrow's Oath monitored the situation through Auspex lenses and psi detection wards. The ship's choir of astropaths screamed as unseen tendrils brushed against their minds. Inquisitor Valen's Vox officer swore. Ma'am, something's bleeding through the anomaly field. It's not an echo, it's intelligent. Inquisitor Valen's expression hardened. Demon incursion? Unknown. It's using the Psyker's energy as an anchor point. Gojo's eyes widened. Wait, my energy? A thunderous crack split the sky. Reality tore open like flesh. From the rift, a column of purple flame emerged. Not fire, but a fractal bloom of madness and sound. 1,000 whispers poured forth, each voice chanting the same phrase in languages no throat could form. The architect sees you. Gojo staggered as the warp screamed through his mind. His limitless barrier shuttered, not broken, but touched. The voices clawed at the edges of his consciousness, probing, dissecting, curious. Sarah shouted over the storm, "What's happening?" He gritted his teeth. Something in that storm knows my power. It's curious. Then from within the warp fissure, a shape emerged, tall, serpentine, shimmering in impossible hues. Eyes upon eyes, mouths whispering riddles. A demon of Tzinch, the Lord of Changes, had found its way through the gap his very existence had torn. Sarah drew her bolt pistol, though she knew it would be useless. By the throne! The demon laughed, its voice like silk over broken glass. A mortal who touches infinity. What an exquisite contradiction. The changer of ways must taste this. Gojo's smirked returned, though his aura sharpened. You talk too much. The demon's hand reached for him, a talon of pure psychic fire. Gojo raised his own, palm open. The air crystallized into a perfect sphere of stillness. Curse technique reversal. Red. A pulse of inverted energy tore outward, collapsing the air into nothingness. The demon screamed as its essence disintegrated, scattered into shimmering fragments. For a heartbeat, the warp fissure shrank. But the voices didn't stop. They multiplied. The air rippled again. Laughter, gibbering, interest. Gojo lowered his hand slowly.
Okay, maybe they don't die so easily here. Sarah steadied herself. That thing came for you. I noticed. This world, this galaxy, they'll keep coming now. You've been marked. Gojo turned to her, eyes glinting with something rare, genuine concern. Then I guess you'd better tell your emperor to brace himself. Hours later, on the Harrow's Oath, Inquisitor Valen watched the replay of the engagement through a data slate. Her subordinate, Acolyte Karen, stood beside her. Psychometric readings confirm it, Karen said quietly. The entity's resonance matches Tsinchian patterns, and the Psyker's energy field interfered with our Geller wards. He could destabilize the entire ship uncontrolled. She nodded slowly. And yet, he saved the garrison, killed a demon with a gesture, held the warp at bay. You saw it. Which makes him valuable, Karen said, or dangerous beyond all reason. She turned the slate off. Perhaps both. In the isolation chamber below, Gojo sat on a metal bench, blindfold restored. The null field generators around him hummed faintly, bathing the cell in a sterile, invisible hum meant to suppress psychic activity. He yawned. You really think this is gonna stop me? The intercom clicked. Sarah's voice echoed through the speakers. No, but it gives me time to decide if you're worth keeping alive. Gojo chuckled. You'll find I'm great company once you stop thinking I'm going to eat your soul. You underestimate how many psychers have told me that. Her tone was cold, but behind it lay curiosity and something close to fear. Gojo leaned back, folding his arms. Tell me, Valen, ever wonder what your emperor would think of someone who can bend infinity? Static filled the channel for a moment, then her voice quieter. If he's still watching, he'd call you a threat to the Imperium. Gojo smiled faintly. Then maybe he and I have something in common. The hum of the null field deepened, and the lights flickered. Somewhere far beyond, the warp whispered in laughter. The tension builds. Subscribe to witness more tales from the Dark Millennium. Comment your theories below. What corruption stalks our heroes?
The lights in the containment bay dimmed one by one, replaced by the red pulse of emergency lumens. The null field generators whined like dying insects. Gojo sat perfectly still, a patient smile tugging at his lips as he felt the suppression field falter. He didn't need to move. His senses, expanded through the 6 eyes, traced the flickering lattice of psionic energy across the ship. He could see everything, the flicker of servo skulls drifting through corridors, the pulsing heat signatures of terrified crew, and above all, the roiling aurora of the warp beyond the hull. Something vast stirred out there. It wasn't merely observing anymore. It was hungry. Inquisitor Sarah Valen stood in the ship's strategium, surrounded by Vox officers and adepts shouting reports. The Harrow's Oath trembled as psychic turbulence lashed against its Geller field. "Warp interference is spiking," one officer yelled. "Sector 7 containment grid destabilized." Sarah's knuckles whitened against the console. "Keep the field stable. I don't want another demon breaching through." "Ma'am, the interference is coming from inside the ship!" A fresh chill swept through the chamber. Sarah knew exactly where it was coming from. "Lock down the isolation decks and activate every null field within 100 meters of Cell 13. The command confirmed what the bridge crew feared. The anomaly, the so-called Gojo Satoru, was waking up. Inside the containment cell, Gojo tilted his head. "You people really love your red lights and panic alarms, huh?" The null field surged again, pressing down on him like a physical weight. For a normal psyker, it would have been agony, a suppression of thought and soul alike. But for Gojo, it was little more than a breeze against a mountain. He lifted his hand, fingers flexing lazily. The field around him rippled like disturbed water. Infinity isn't energy. It's math, conceptual. They can't suppress an equation. Still, the oppressive hum made him frown. Okay, that's mildly annoying. He stood, and the sensors above his cell began to glitch violently. Auspex screens across the ship flared white, their readings spiking into impossibility. Inquisitor Valen's voice crackled over the intercom. "Don't do it, Gojo! You don't understand what you're tampering with!" He looked up. "I've spent my life tampering with things people told me not to. I'm still here." "Barely," she shot back. "The warp is feeding on your presence. Every time you use your power, it reacts, like a beacon to things that should not exist." Gojo's smile faded slightly. "Then maybe I should go out there and have a word with it." "Don't be foolish. You're on an Imperial vessel. You'll doom everyone aboard." He sighed, shrugging. "I wasn't planning on it, but you can't cage infinity, Valen." Then the ship shook violently. On the bridge, alarms blared as cracks of purple lightning spiderwebbed across the Gellerfield projection. The void outside churned like a living storm, colors no human eye should see, folding into one another. Sarah barked orders over the din. "Divert auxiliary power to the Gellerfield! Seal off the lower decks!" An officer turned, face pale. "Ma'am, something is breaching. It's coming through the psyker cell." The hololith showed a warped image. Gojo's containment cell twisting, its walls bending inward like molten wax. A shape was forcing its way through reality, a writhing silhouette made of feathers, smoke, and eyes. Sarah whispered, "Not again." Inside the cell, the air cracked open. A shimmering mass of translucent flesh and endless mouths oozed through the tear, muttering in dozens of languages. Its laughter was wrong, layered, infinite. "Beautiful," the demon hissed. "You are the missing equation, the paradox given flesh. You are what the Changer promised us." Gojo's blindfold twitched as he frowned. "You again? Didn't I vaporize one of you already?" "Fragments of Chinch are infinite, but you are finite infinity. The warp cannot understand you. It must." Gojo inhaled slowly. His aura shifted. The cell's metal walls began to hum and distort as the air folded in on itself. He smiled faintly. "You want infinity? Fine. Let's see how much you can handle." The moment he released his cursed energy, the entire deck screamed. Inquisitor Valen's bridge officers were thrown to the ground as shockwaves rippled through the Harrow's oath. Warning runes flared crimson. Energy spike in Sector 7. It's tearing space apart. Psi field amplitude off the charts. Sarah gripped the railing, eyes locked on the projection of Gojo's cell. Light, blinding, pure blue-white flooded the screen. The demon writhed within it, melting, reforming, learning. What is he doing? Whispered Chiron. Sarah's throat tightened. He's opening a domain. Inside the cell, Gojo stood at the center of infinity itself. The world had gone still, every atom locked in place. The demon thrashed, but its form was frozen, dissected, its existence spread across an impossible distance. "Welcome to my realm," Gojo said softly. "Here, information flows endlessly. Every particle, every thought, analyzed, defined, stripped bare. You wanted to understand infinity? Then drown in it." He lifted his hand and closed his fingers slowly. The demon exploded into fractal shards of light, consumed by the very concept it sought to study. The rift sealed itself, reality groaning as equilibrium fought to reassert existence. When it was done, the silence was absolute. Back on the bridge, the sensors flatlined. Then, one by one, the systems rebooted. The ship's gravity normalized, and the Geller field stabilized. Sarah stared at the hololith in stunned silence. The containment bay was gone, vaporized. In its place was a perfectly smooth sphere of glassed metal, still glowing faintly blue. Chiron turned to her. He's still alive." Sarah exhaled shakily. "Of course he is." "Orders, Inquisitor?" She paused. "Prepare for re-entry into real space, and keep him under surveillance at all times. If he so much as breathes wrong, I want to know." Chiron hesitated. "What if he tries that again?" Sarah's gaze hardened. "Then pray the Emperor's light shines brighter than infinity." In the ruins of his cell, Gojo brushed dust from his coat. He looked out through the shattered viewport into the stars beyond and smiled softly. Different universe, same chaos. The warp pulsed faintly in the distance, not retreating, but watching. And somewhere in its depths, 100 eyes blinked in unison. Comment your theories below. What corruption stalks our heroes? The warp is far from done with Gojo Satoru.
The warp had gone silent, but silence was never peace. It was the pause before another storm. Hours after the catastrophic event, the Harrow's Oath limped through the void, engines flickering, void shields barely functional. Crewmen whispered prayers to the Emperor as incense smoke filled the corridors. Inquisitor Sarah Valen stood before the reinforced viewing pane of the Strategium. Stars drifted like cold embers, but she wasn't admiring them. Her eyes were fixed on the black silhouette meditating in the void chamber below. Gojo Satoru, the anomaly, the man who had nearly ripped a hole through the warp itself and survived. "His vitals are impossible," murmured Karen, the ship's astropath. "Its no readings match any human or Xenos baseline. It's as if he's rewriting physics just by existing." Sarah didn't turn from the window. "He's not human, not in the way we understand it." Karen hesitated. "Should we inform the conclave?"
Sarah's jaw tightened. The thought of explaining this to the Ordo Hereticus was enough to make even her blood run cold. "No," she said, finally. "Not yet. The moment we report this, they'll order an exterminatus. They'll burn this ship and everyone on it." "But," I said, "not yet." Her voice echoed like a blade drawn from its sheath. Below them, Gojo sat cross-legged in the darkened containment chamber. The steel walls had been replaced by adamantium and ceramite, the strongest materials the Imperium could muster, though both were now subtly warped from the lingering heat of his previous outburst. He wasn't restrained this time. They'd realized restraints were meaningless. Instead, he was observed, constantly, by cameras, servitors, and psychic wards that trembled whenever he moved. Gojo tilted his head, sensing every eye watching him. "You people are really into surveillance, huh? If you're gonna watch, at least buy me dinner first." No one answered. He chuckled softly, then exhaled, his breath forming a soft ripple in the air, distorting light in microscopic waves. His infinity field was active again, though restrained, balanced carefully between the impossible and the absolute. It wasn't arrogance this time. It was curiosity. The warp, the emperor, the psychic lattice of this universe, all of it was wrong, wrong in a fascinating way. He closed his eyes. Through the 6 eyes, even closed lids couldn't stop the flood of information. He saw threads of psychic energy snaking through the ship, connecting every living being like neurons in a massive, terrified organism. And beneath it all, the warp pulsed like a cosmic heartbeat. "It's alive," he thought. "This whole universe is breathing chaos." Far above, Karen gasped, clutching his head. He's touching the immaterium again. I can feel it, like a sun burning behind a thin wall." Sarah slammed her fist on the console. "Get him to stop! I don't care what it takes!" "Ma'am, how? He's beyond every containment metric." Sarah's voice turned to ice. "Then we remind him what's at stake." She activated the intercom. "Gojo, if you value the lives of the people on this ship, stop whatever you're doing." Gojo didn't open his eyes. "Relax. I'm not breaking anything. Just looking." "You're tearing open the veil." "Are I? Or is your veil just too fragile?" The lights flickered violently. Somewhere deep within the ship, a machine spirit howled. Reality shivered. The ship's hull screamed as tendrils of raw warp energy licked against it, faint, like probing fingers searching for a crack. Gojo's infinity field rippled in response, not allowing one single atom of corruption to touch him. In that moment, something looked back. A mind, ancient, vast, and endless, brushed against his. It wasn't the demon he'd fought earlier. This was something far greater, something that had existed since the first dream of sentience. It whispered in 1,000 voices at once. "You do not belong here, blue-eyed godling. Yet your existence nourishes us. The impossible has entered the possible. You are paradox." Gojo's eyes opened, glowing through his blindfold like twin suns. "I've been called worse." The voices laughed, the sound stretching across dimensions. "Come deeper then, Infinite One. Let us see which of us defines the other." And with that, the connection severed. The warp receded, the tendrils withdrawing, leaving only the distant echo of laughter that faded into static. Gojo exhaled slowly. Now that was interesting. On the bridge, Karen slumped forward, nose bleeding. He made contact with something vast, not a demon, something older. Sarah's face paled. A god. No, Karen whispered, trembling. The god, the architect of fate himself. Silence blanketed the strategium. Even the servitors seemed to hesitate in their work. Tweech, Sarah murmured, the changer's ways. Her gaze hardened. This has gone beyond an anomaly. He's a threat to the balance of the galaxy itself. Meanwhile, Gojo stood, stretching like a man waking from a nap. He smiled faintly to himself. So, the warp has gods now. Cute. He turned toward the viewport, looking out into the infinite void. I guess I'll have to meet them all. The lights dimmed again. The warp pulsed once more, distant yet aware. And far beyond mortal perception, Tweech laughed, a sound that rippled through 1,000 timelines at once. The game had begun. The warp's laughter never truly fades. It lingers, echoing through metal bulkheads, bleeding through the vox in whispers only half heard. For 3 days, the Harrow's Oath drifted under emergency protocols. The Inquisitor's ship had weathered many horrors, demonic incursions, cultist uprisings, even the psychic storms of the Cicatrix Maledictum, but nothing like this. Nothing like Gojo Satoru. Sarah Vaylor hadn't slept. She sat in her command sanctum, reading and rereading the transcripts of the astropathic logs. Each data slate ended the same way. Spontaneous null signature surges, psychic collapse, and a single repeated word scrawled by bloodied hands. Infinity. Every psyker on board had seen it in their minds before succumbing to seizures or madness. Now the Inquisitor stood before a hololithic projection of a new problem, one far greater than the anomaly. "Report," she said, her voice brittle from sleeplessness. Tech Priest Enoch bowed, Vox Grill hissing. "We have confirmed warp signatures converging from 3 separate vectors. Estimated classification, demon-hosted entities." "Drawn here?" she asked. "Indeed, the psychic echo of the entity you detain has sung to them." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Then it's begun." Gojo, meanwhile, stood in his containment chamber, though by now it was more of a courtesy than a prison. He could feel them coming. The warp pressed at the edges of his infinity like waves lapping against an unbreakable wall. And within those waves, shadows whispered, things that had no faces, yet smiled. He stretched lazily, cracking his neck. "So, more guests, huh?" His fingers brushed the air, and the world folded, space bending slightly around him. It wasn't sorcery, not in the sense these people understood. His curse technique wasn't psychic. It redefined the idea of distance and energy entirely. The warp found that offensive. Chiron, pale and trembling, burst into Sarah's sanctum. "They're here! The demons have manifested in orbit! A full-scale incursion!" "How many?" "Too many." Before Sarah could reply, alarm shrieked throughout the ship. Guttural laughter echoed through the Vox, not the Emperor's machine spirits, but mockery. Across the void, reality tore open. From it spilled abominations of impossible geometry, pink and blue horrors, shifting shapes of Tizentian origin. Each screamed in joyous agony, their flesh melting and reforming as they swarmed toward the Harrow's oath. "Activate all defensive batteries," Sarah roared. "Purge them before they reach the hull." Gun batteries awoke, spewing hot white plasma and blessed promethium, each beam carved through demon flesh, but for every one slain, 2 more crawled from the rift. The bridge shook violently as void shields flared and died. Sarah gritted her teeth. "We can't hold. Get the psychers in a binding circle. We need to close that rift." "Ma'am," Chiron stammered, "the psychers are dead. The backlash. Then who the hell is left to hold them back?" Chiron's eyes flicked toward the observation deck. Sarah followed his gaze and froze. Gojo was standing before the armored viewport, watching the oncoming demons with mild curiosity. He raised one hand. The first wave of horror screamed toward the ship and then stopped. Literally, a perfect, motionless tableau hung in the void. 1,000 demons frozen in mid-flight, limbs stretched in agony, teeth bared, ichor suspended. From the ship's interior, a deep, resonant hum filled the air, like the universe itself holding its breath. Sarah stared. What is he doing? Chiron's nose bled again. He's altering the field, denying movement. Even time doesn't pass where his power touches. Gojo turned his head slightly, smiling behind the blindfold. "You're noisy creatures, aren't you?" He flicked his fingers. The demons disintegrated, dissolving into radiant dust that scattered harmlessly into the void. For a moment there was peace. Then the stars themselves bent. Something vast pushed through the rift, a shadow with 1,000 eyes and 1,000,000,000 thoughts, a being so complex that even its silhouette refused to remain constant. It was both bird and flame, laughter and nightmare. The crew screamed as their minds brushed its will. Chiron fell to his knees, weeping blood. It's him, the changer, the architect of fate. Tizench had come, and he was amused. So, this is the mortal who dares to hold infinity. The voice filled every skull aboard the ship, resonating like music played on bone. Gojo stepped forward, expression calm, though the energy around him trembled with something close to exhilaration. "I'm not the first god to test me, but you might be the most talkative. Bold, bored. Then let us entertain each other." Reality convulsed, the rift expanded, swallowing the void. Sarah screamed orders no one could follow. Demons poured in like a flood. And in the center of it all, Gojo Satoru smiled, not out of arrogance, but joy. Because, for the first time since arriving in this miserable, magnificent galaxy, he'd found the challenge worth his attention. "All right, bird brain, let's see if your magic's stronger than infinity." Light erupted, blue and white, blinding and divine.
The warp howled, and the battle between infinity and change began. The void split apart. Color bled from reality as light twisted into fractal madness. The Harrow's oath groaned like a wounded titan, its hull bending under stresses no mortal material was ever meant to endure. Crewmen screamed prayers as fire and frost coexisted in the same breath as the warp poured itself through the shattered rift. At its center floated two figures, Gojo Satoru and the demon god avatar of Tsinch, the changer of ways. The immaterium convulsed around them. Planets, suns, and timelines flickered like candle flames, and the Emperor's light dimmed in the region. This was no battle of matter. It was a rewriting of existence itself. Gojo's blindfold fluttered away like ash. His 6 eyes glowed with blue radiance that cut through madness. Each detail of the warp unfolded before him. Every particle, every impossible equation, every living thought. He smiled faintly. This place, it's like a cursed womb, birthing insanity on command. You call this divinity? The demon lord's voice came from every direction, and none. You see patterns, little mortal, but you cannot perceive the grand design. The warp is not madness, it is freedom. The demon lord's form coalesced into something mockingly humanoid, a towering avian sorcerer wreathed in ever-shifting flames. Every blink revealed new shapes, a man of fire, a serpent of eyes, a cloud of wings. Gojo tilted his head. Freedom. You mean chaos without consequence, where every lie becomes a truth if you repeat it loud enough. And yet you do the same. You bend the laws of your reality, make infinity your servant. You are my child in all but name. Gojo laughed, not with mockery, but genuine amusement. You're wrong about one thing, and that is? He raised his hand. Infinity serves no one. It simply is. The universe reacted. Light warped around Gojo, distorting into concentric ripples that spread outward like glass fracturing. Every atom between him and the demon froze in place. Distance itself ceased to exist. The warp howled in confusion. Demons flickered, their shapes unraveling as Gojo's field denied them meaning. Infinity. The word wasn't a command, it was truth spoken into a dimension built on lies. Tsinch recoiled, his body fragmenting into 1,000 screaming faces. Where Gojo's technique held sway, change could not occur. Impossible! Yeah, that's kind of my thing. He stepped forward once, and in that one step crossed kilometers. With a flick of his wrist, a compressed sphere of cursed energy detonated. The explosion didn't burn, it erased. The surrounding demons ceased to exist, their essence folded back into non-being. But even as the void trembled, the warp retaliated. Tsinch spread his wings, and from each feather burst galaxies of color and distortion. Reality rewrote itself around Gojo, twisting probability, turning cause into effect, and effect
into cause. You cannot touch that which is undefined. You are a number. I am the equation itself. Gojo's grin faltered for the first time. The warp's logic wasn't simply power, it was conceptual warfare. His cursed energy struggled to find footing against the unending redefinition of existence. Time looped. His body flickered through alternate moments, standing, falling, dead, alive, infinite, all at once. But even as the god sought to unmake him, Gojo centered himself. His voice came calm, steady, threading through the chaos. Limitless doesn't care about your rules. I see everything, every variation, every paradox. His 6 eyes pulsed, and suddenly the infinite recursion stopped. He held the universe steady. Then he whispered, "Cursed technique reversal, red." A crimson sphere bloomed in the void, expanding faster than light, rewriting all it touched into annihilation. It collided with Tsinch's flames, and for a moment even God screamed. The explosion was seen from orbit as a wave of impossible light rippling through the materium. Imperial ships across the sector registered the psychic detonation, and astropaths died, screaming of a blue flame devouring fate itself. Inside the Harrow's Oath, klaxons died to static. Sarah Valen clung to the command lectern as reality pulsed, the walls bleeding light. Containment has failed. Warp bleed across all decks. Chiron convulsed on the floor, his mind overloaded by the psychic storm. He's fighting a god, Inquisitor. If he wins, he breaks causality. If he loses, he doesn't lose. Sarah's voice was barely audible over the sound of the ship disintegrating and reforming in cycles. In the void, Gojo and Tsinch circled each other like predators made of ideas. "You cannot exist here forever," the demon crooned. "Every breath you take feeds me. Every thought you think reshapes my realm. You are part of the warp now, whether you wish it or not." Gojo's voice was low. "Then maybe it's time someone cleaned it up." Cleaned, curse technique, domain expansion, infinite void. The warp screamed. For the briefest instant, all of creation experienced what it meant to know everything. Every thought, every molecule, every truth flooded through the immaterium like divine lightning. Demons went mad and dissolved. The rift collapsed under the weight of perfect information. Even Tsinch staggered, howling in outrage as omniscience invaded his endless deceit. Gojo stood at the center of his domain, light radiating from him in endless fractals. This is what infinity really looks like. And then the light faded. Tsinch was gone. The warp closed, though not willingly. And Gojo fell silent, suspended between realities. On the Harrow's Oath, everything was quiet. The fires had died. The alarms had ceased. The ship drifted, bathed in the dying glow of the rift. Sarah stared out the viewport, whispering, "What did he do?" Chiron shivered. He gave a god knowledge. Even they can't handle that. Is he alive? The astropath closed his eyes. He's not gone, but he's not here either. Sarah nodded slowly. Then we wait, because if that thing wakes up again, we'll all know it. Far away, in the infinite depths of the warp, something stirred. Gojo opened his eyes and saw the galaxy from outside. He smiled faintly, still not bored, and then he turned and stepped forward into whatever came next. There is a silence that follows the death of gods. It is not peace, it is waiting. The Harrow's oath drifted for 6 standard hours in the stillness after the impossible. No Vox signals, no warp interference, not even the hum of its engines. It was as though the entire ship and everyone aboard had been set aside by reality, an object too anomalous to classify. Inquisitor Sarah Valen stood alone in the observation chapel, surrounded by flickering candles that guttered in zero gravity. Her reflection in the void glass looked pale and haunted. Behind her, the icon of the Aquila had cracked clean down the middle during the battle. She whispered a prayer that felt hollow. Emperor, preserve us. What did we just survive? The Vox crackled. Bridge to Inquisitor. We're detecting movement. Specify. There was a long pause before the reply came, thin and trembling. Outside the ship, my lady. Someone's walking. Sarah's blood turned to ice. In the void beyond the hull, Gojo Satoru stood barefoot upon the nothingness of space. His coat drifted lazily, rippling in a wind that didn't exist. His blindfold was gone. The 6 eyes shone like twin novas, reflecting entire constellations. He didn't breathe. He didn't need to. The stars whispered through him. Fragments of warp energy still danced around his body, flickers of Tzeentch's former essence, trying and failing to comprehend the man who had unmade them. He turned his gaze toward the ship. The crew could feel it instantly. Even without eyes upon him, every mortal soul aboard knew he was watching. Some fell to their knees in awe, others wept or screamed. Chiron the astropath pressed his forehead to the floor. He's not human anymore. Sarah clenched her jaw. He was never human to begin with. Gojo raised a hand. The broken void shields of the Harrow's oath shimmered, reforming into perfect symmetry, an act that should have taken the Mechanicus a month of rituals, achieved by a thought. Then, with effortless grace, he stepped through space and appeared inside the ship. No portal, no light, just presence. He stood before Sarah, smiling faintly. You look like you've seen a ghost. She took a slow step back, her bolt pistol rising instinctively. Are you still you? Gojo chuckled. To find me. Are you possessed? He tilted his head. Maybe the other way around. Behind him, bulkheads repaired themselves, melted ceramite cooled and reformed, lights flickering back to life. The machine spirits sang in harmony, a song not of fear, but reverence. Sarah could only watch as the impossible unfolded around her. Kyrain stumbled in, blood on his collar. "My lady, he's healed the ship. Every deck, even the dead are—" He stopped, trembling. "Their bodies are gone, just gone, not vaporized, not teleported, erased." Gojo turned toward him with an unreadable expression. "They were suffering. I fixed that." Sarah's voice broke. "You unmade them." He smiled gently. "Same thing." For a moment, the Inquisitor considered firing her weapon, but even as her finger hovered over the trigger, she knew it was meaningless. The bolt pistol in her hand might as well have been a prayer whispered to a dying son. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said, keeping her tone level. "Every psychic beacon, every inquisitorial archive within 5 sectors will register that explosion. They'll send fleets, space marines, Grey Knights." "I know. They'll kill you. Maybe. But maybe I'll learn something before that." "Learn?" He looked past her, into the void. "This universe runs on fear, Sarah. Fear of gods, of heresy, of the unknown. But if infinity exists, if I exist, then your gods aren't infinite. They're just powerful liars." "Blasphemy," she whispered. "Perspective," he replied softly. The vox flared with static. A voice cut through, cold and authoritative. "Inquisitor Valen, this is Captain Thal of the Indomitable Faith. We have detected your distress beacon. Identify the anomaly immediately." Sarah froze. Her gaze darted toward Gojo. He smiled knowingly. "That's my cue, huh?" She swallowed hard. "They'll kill you on sight. Wouldn't be the first time someone tried." He turned away, the air around him shimmering. Space bent, folded, and swallowed him whole. Moments later, the Indomitable Faith, a strike cruiser of the Grey Knights, emerged from the warp, its hull blazing with runes of banishment. The Emperor's chosen demon hunters had arrived. They expected corruption, heresy, or a demon invasion. They did not expect what they saw. A man, unarmored and unarmed, standing calmly in the void between ships. The Grey Knight's sensors screamed, their librarians fainted, every rune of protection overloaded. "By the throne," whispered Captain Thal. "What is that?" Gojo's voice echoed in their minds, calm and amused. "Name's Gojo Satoru. You could say I'm new around here." In the warp, the shadows of dead gods stirred again. Tzeentch was gone, but others were watching. Khorne, the blood god, tasted the psychic echo and smiled. Nurgle laughed, calling it a delightful infection. Slaanesh shivered in fascination. Even the dormant fragments of the old ones blinked at the anomaly. A human who denied causality, a psyker who was not of the warp. Something new entered the great game, and none of the gods knew whose side he was on. Back aboard the Harrow's Oath, Sarah Valen collapsed into her command chair, trembling. "Emperor, protect us," she whispered. "He's declared war on reality itself." Chiron stared out into the void, voice hollow. Or maybe... He looked up, eyes glazed with awe. Reality finally met its match.
The warp trembled. Where Gojo Satoru walked, madness paused, as though even insanity had to stop and think. The currents of unreality shifted around him, trying to calculate, trying to understand, and failing. He drifted through the void between ships as the indomitable faith's weapons locked onto him. Macro cannons rotated, cyclonic torpedoes primed. Hundreds of Grey Knights prayed in unison, their voices like thunder through the warp stream. For the Emperor! For Terra! For purity! They fired, in poor tone. Lances of pure, sanctified light burned through the void. Each shot was a hymn made into flame, warhead prayers designed to obliterate daemons and demigods alike. The impacts never reached him. They stopped, frozen mid-space, orbiting him in a halo of suspended devastation. Within Gojo's infinity, time itself hesitated. Every photon, every molecule, every thought that neared him became trapped in an endless equation of impossibility. He looked at the frozen fury surrounding him and exhaled, amused. Same trick, different century. He flicked a finger. The torpedoes reversed course. They curved like divine serpents, arcing back toward their launch points. On the bridge of the indomitable faith, sirens screamed, "By the throne! He's reflecting our own fire! Shields to maximum! Evasive maneuvers!" The explosions that followed were silent in the void, but deafening in the minds of the crew. The faith-imbued torpedoes detonated against the cruiser's own barriers, consuming runes, armor, and psychers in radiant annihilation. When the light faded, the indomitable faith was drifting, wounded, crippled, but not destroyed. A voice echoed through the psychic storm. "Enough!" It wasn't Gojo's. The sound was inside the universe, resonating from every atom of the materium. It carried the weight of command, of eternal authority. The Grey Knights froze mid-prayer. The Inquisitor aboard the Heros Oath fell to her knees, hands shaking. Sarah gasped, "No, it can't be!" From the warp, a shape began to take form, wreathed in golden fire. A man of pure radiance stepped forth, draped in light older than humanity's sins. The Emperor of mankind had turned his gaze from Terra. Even as a fragment, even as a shadow of his former power, his presence burned across the immaterium. Every daemon screamed, every loyal soul wept, and Gojo Satoru smiled. "Well," he said softly, "took you long enough." The warp itself parted around the Emperor's will. Time slowed, stars dimmed. In that impossible intersection of realities, one being infinite by choice, the other by divinity, two gazes met. The Emperor spoke first, his voice not heard, but understood. "You are not mine." Gojo nodded. "You're not wrong. You wield power without soul binding, without faith. You walk the warp unburned. Guess I'm not on the menu. You are an anomaly. That's what Chink said before he stopped existing." A silence stretched between them, two infinities observing one another.
Gojo's infinity shimmered, an unbreakable equation of distance. The Emperor's aura burned, consuming contradiction through sheer will. If either moved, universes could collapse. But neither did. Instead, the Emperor studied him. Your existence disrupts balance. You are not of this galaxy. You should not be. Gojo tilted his head. Yeah, I've heard that a few times. You endanger mankind. I saved them. You destroyed gods. They weren't real. And yet they were. You unravel threads you cannot see. Gojo's grin faded slightly. So, you're here to stop me? To understand you. The indomitable faith floated silently. The Grey Knights knelt in psychic awe, unable to move. Inquisitor Valen clutched her rosarius as the lights flickered violently. By the Emperor! He's talking to him! No, they're not talking. They're measuring each other. Gojo's hand twitched. The space around him shimmered. Tell me, Emperor, why cling to this order of fear? You've built an empire that worships you like a god, even though you hate gods. Because mankind needs gods to survive. And what if they didn't? Then they would die. Gojo's smile returned, sharp and curious. Maybe it's time to test that theory. The golden light flared. The Emperor's voice thundered. You would challenge divinity itself? Gojo raised his blindfold, revealing the full brilliance of the 6 eyes. Space bent around his gaze, fracturing into prisms of infinite data. He whispered, I already did. The warp convulsed. Every daemon world, every sorcerer, every psyker across the galaxy felt a ripple. A shiver of dread passed through existence itself. For a fleeting instant, every timeline branched, split, and screamed, Gojo's infinity tearing at the fabric of fate. Then, silence. Back on the Harrow's Oath, Inquisitor Valen clutched her rosarius as the lights flickered violently. By the Emperor, he's fighting him! No, they're rewriting reality. In the void, light met infinity. Faith met perception. God met paradox. And somewhere in that cataclysmic dance, the universe hesitated, unsure which one it truly belonged to.
Reality shattered like glass. The warp bled into the materium, and for a moment there was no line between them. Stars flickered, their light scattering like frightened sparks as impossible energies rippled through the void. Ships drifted without motion. Planets screamed through their atmospheres as the pressure of 2 infinities strained existence itself. Gojo Satoru and the Emperor of Mankind stood in the storm's eye. To the human mind, it was divine wrath. To psychers, it was pure psychic annihilation. To the entities of chaos, it was terror. The 4 screamed. Tzich's realm convulsed in agony. The architect of fate clawed at his own feathers, screeching at equations unraveling beyond his comprehension. Khorne's brass citadels cracked as rivers of blood turned to dust beneath an impossible light. Slanesh's laughter died mid-note, their pleasure drowned in an absence of sensation. Even Nurgle's garden rotted into silence. 2 beings, one divine through faith, the other infinite through perception, were at war, without moving a single step.
Inside the indomitable faith, Inquisitor Valen struggled to breathe. The ship's hull groaned like a dying god. Vox systems melted under waves of warp feedback. "Magos!" she screamed. "Stabilize the Geller field!" The tech priest's voice was a digital prayer, desperate and trembling. "The field no longer answers, Inquisitor. It recognizes two realities competing for supremacy." A thunderclap shook the vessel. In the void, Gojo and the Emperor exchanged another wordless clash, one not of fists, but of truths. "You cannot exist without consequence," the Emperor's voice boomed, both everywhere and nowhere. "Your infinity is corruption, masked as purity." Gojo's eyes shimmered, twin oceans of fractal light. Infinity is purity. It's the space between all things, limitless, perfect, untouchable. "Then you are the warp by another name." "Wrong," Gojo said, stepping closer, though distance no longer mattered. "The warp reacts to emotion, chaos, desire. I am none of those. I am constant." The Emperor's golden aura flared, fracturing the immaterium into radiant shards. "Constancy is stagnation. Stagnation is death. And yet you cling to it. You hold humanity in stasis, frozen by dogma, ruled by fear. Tell me, Emperor, when was the last time your people grew?" The psychic gale intensified. Across the segmentum solar, astropaths went blind. Navigators screamed and clawed their third eyes out. The Astronomicon flickered. The Emperor himself faltered for half a heartbeat. Gojo pressed the opening. "You burned billions for faith, called it necessary sacrifice, and call yourself merciful. You've created an empire of corpses worshipping a corpse. They live because I will it. They exist." The Emperor's radiance dimmed. His voice grew quieter but sharper, cutting through the void like a blade. "You think yourself free, yet you are bound by your own arrogance. Without purpose, power consumes itself. Tell me, Gojo Satoru, what is your purpose here?" Gojo hesitated. For the first time, there was something almost human in his gaze. "I don't know. Maybe to see if this universe can still surprise me." The Emperor stepped forward, each stride echoing through the galaxies. His presence forced the warp into submission. "Then you are a child lost among titans. This realm is not yours to test." Gojo smiled faintly. "Then stop me." The universe bent. The Emperor raised his hand and galaxies trembled. Stars turned white-hot, burning themselves out as his will condensed into one act of pure divine force. It wasn't an attack, it was a decree, a rewriting of the laws of existence to erase the paradox that was Gojo Satoru. But Gojo lifted a single finger, and the Emperor's light stopped. It didn't fade. It didn't weaken. It simply stopped moving forward. A golden sun frozen mid-burst. A divine law caught in the trap of infinity. Gojo's voice was calm, but laced with something new, something like sorrow. "You're strong," he said, "but you're still playing within your own rules. I stopped believing in rules a long time ago." The Emperor's expression didn't change, but his light flickered. For an instant, his face looked almost tired. "And that is why you will fail. Infinity without meaning is nothing." He extended his other hand. Where his palm opened, hope emerged, a light not of power, but of faith. Billions of human souls all across the Imperium unknowingly lent their devotion to that spark. Their prayers, their fear, their desperation, all funneled into their God Emperor. The warp roared. Gojo felt it, a tidal wave of belief slamming into his reality. Infinity strained, trembling under the pressure, not from power, but from collective will. For the first time, his eyes widened. "What is this?" "Humanity," the Emperor whispered. "They believe in me. That belief shapes reality itself." The faith of 1,000,000,000,000 souls pressed upon him, bending his domain. Gojo's infinity cracked with faint crystalline fractures that spread like spider webs. The Emperor's golden hand reached through the breach. "Return to your own world, sorcerer. This one has no place for gods who do not bleed." Gojo's blindfold fluttered in the windless void. His voice softened. "Then maybe I'll teach them what freedom feels like before I go." He snapped his fingers. Light inverted. Everything went white. When the blinding radiance faded, both were gone. The indomitable faith drifted in silence. The warp stilled. The Emperor's golden presence dimmed, but his light still burned faintly upon Terra. Inquisitor Valen fell to her knees, whispering through trembling lips. "Who won?" No one answered. Somewhere, far beyond the reach of the Astronomicon, a new light shimmered in a distant galaxy, a universe untouched by the Emperor's gaze. And within it, Gojo Satoru laughed himself softly. "Guess that's one way to end class." Still with us in the darkness? Hit that like button if this tale chills your soul. Silence. True silence. The kind that follows creation and precedes apocalypse. The galaxy breathed again. The Astronomicon flickered back to steady burn, its psychic beam threading once more through the warp like a wounded but unbroken heart. Warp storms abated. Daemons howled as the Emperor's gaze, faint yet present, pressed them back into their filth. But in the places between the stars, something remained. A residue, not of warp energy, nor of faith, but something else. Mathematically perfect, impossibly constant. Gojo Satoru's infinity had left a fingerprint on reality. Aboard the indomitable faith, Inquisitor Valen staggered through the wrecked command deck. The air tasted of burnt ozone and sanctified blood. The Vox crackled with half-voices, machine spirits mumbling fragmented litanies. "Status report," she rasped, voice hoarse from psychic feedback. A tech priest, its body half-molten, turned its head with mechanical precision. "Warp interference declining, but anomalous readings persist in local void space. The phenomenon resists classification." Valen looked out the shuttered viewport. Outside, a sphere of light hung silently in the dark, not radiating, not pulsing, simply existing. "By the Emperor's mercy," she whispered, "he left something behind." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the consequences began to unfold. On Cadia's ruins, where the warp and materium had forever intertwined, the storms parted for the first time in 10,000 years. Broken citadels stood clear under a real sky. Guardsmen who had never seen sunlight wept openly. On Mars, tech priests fell into binary prayer as Auspex arrays displayed data that broke logic, readings of space where time had no curvature. On Holy Terra, deep beneath the golden throne, the custodians felt a flicker of the Emperor's fatigue, a mortal ache beneath divine endurance. The Master of Mankind whispered, unheard, "He has touched the lattice of the warp, and it remembers him." Gojo stood in that infinite residue, no longer within the warp, no longer bound to the galaxy's physics, a place of perfect neutrality, a blind spot in reality itself. He closed his eyes, feeling the balance. So, this is what's left of infinity here. Stable, but lonely. He turned his head slightly, as if listening. Something whispered back, faint, fragmented echoes of the warp's dying screams. "Guess I broke your toy box. Sorry about that." He reached out. His fingers brushed the membrane of the universe. It shivered like water touched by light. Beyond, countless souls screamed in pain, worship, ecstasy, humanity's eternal choir. Gojo sighed. Still the same problem. Everyone needs a god. He thought of the Emperor's words, "You cannot exist without consequence." Maybe the Emperor had been right. Infinity without purpose was an endless mirror, unbreakable, untouchable, but empty. Elsewhere, in a bastion of the Inquisition, the High Lords of Terra convened. Their faces were hidden behind vox masks, their voices trembling despite their power. The Emperor's radiance waned during the anomaly. For 0.8 seconds his light diminished. That has never happened. Could this intruder be a threat equal to chaos? Another voice, thin and sharp, replied, "Chaos feeds on emotion. This one, this Gojo Satoru, is an absence of it. He is the warp's death writ in mortal form." "And yet," murmured another, "he opposed the ruinous powers." They fell silent. The words were dangerous, heretical, but true. Back in his isolated space, Gojo traced a spiral in the void, lines of pure math and will looping around themselves until they formed a doorway. Home, or something close. But before he could step through, the space behind him rippled. A voice, not divine, not infernal, called out, "Gojo Satoru." He turned, eyes narrowing. "Huh, you're new." A figure stepped forth, no armor, no weapon, no faith sigil, merely robes of impossible pattern and a staff of singing glass. "You are not meant to exist here, but you have changed the pattern nonetheless." "Go you one of the local gods I missed?" The figure tilted its head. "I am what remains when gods and men fail. You may call me the Watcher of Threads." "And what do you watch, exactly?" "Consequences." The Watcher's staff glowed with fractured light, showing glimpses of futures unmade, humanity rising without gods, chaos shriveling into entropy, the Emperor finally resting, the galaxy reborn in silence. "You have wounded the warp. Its scream echoes through eternity. You must decide whether that wound will heal or fester." Gojo chuckled. "You sound like my old principal." He looked around the timeless void. "So, what happens if I just leave?" The Watcher smiled, or perhaps the universe smiled through it. Then the galaxy will adapt, and your infinity will become its next law. Gojo's grin faded. You mean, it'll spread? Already has. Back aboard the Harrow's Oath, Chiron, the young psyker, convulsed. His eyes glowed white. "Inquisitor!" Valen shouted, rushing to his side. He gasped between spasms. "He's not gone. He's everywhere." Valen's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Chiron's voice came out layered, harmonic, like thousands of minds speaking through him. Every thought, every atom now carries a trace of him. Infinity has touched reality. There is no distance anymore. He goes still. Then he whispered, "He made the galaxy smaller." The Inquisitor turned toward the viewport, watching the stars, and for a second, only a second, she could see them move, distances collapsing, light bending, space reordering itself around a new constant. She whispered, "By the throne, what has he done?" In the infinite white void, Gojo stood still, watching as the fabric of the galaxy adjusted to his absence. He laughed softly, not mockingly, but with something close to wonder. Maybe this place can change. The Watcher bowed his head, and maybe you've just begun something worse. Gojo adjusted his blindfold, smiled at the horizon of nothing, and stepped into the doorway.
The galaxy shifted, slowly, subtly, irrevocably. What Gojo Satoru had left behind was not destruction, it was balance, but of a kind the 41st Millennium had never known. The warp, that roiling sea of madness and emotion, began to quiet. Not entirely, but its tides lessened, its storms abated. Where once screamed the laughter of gods, now echoed the soft hum of stillness. And it terrified the powers of chaos. In the realm of Dzinch, the architect of fate writhed upon his crystalline throne. The threads of destiny, once innumerable, flowing, manipulable, had turned rigid. Where infinite potential once lay, now was limit. "This cannot be," hissed the changer of ways, his many faces contorting into one expression of true horror. "Infinity fixed." The skeins of fate resisted his touch. Every attempt to twist, to weave, to lie, simply halted. It was as though causality itself now understood there were things beyond manipulation, truths too stable even for chaos to warp. And deep within his towers of changing glass, the demon realized Gojo's infinity had infected the warp itself. On a distant shrine world, a sister of battle knelt before a cracked statue of the Emperor. Her name was Canoness Viridia Halbrecht, and she had fought demons, witches, heretics, and worse. But today she prayed not out of duty, but confusion. "Father of man, something's wrong. My faith burns, but it no longer feels returned." Her rosarius glowed faintly, not golden, but white, a strange radiance that did not belong to the Emperor. As she prayed, her surroundings shimmered. The world seemed sharper, distances precise, time itself honest. She wept. "Your light is different, my lord. What have you done?" But the Emperor had done nothing. It was the shadow of another, a teacher, a man who refused to bow to gods.
Meanwhile, aboard a hidden black ship orbiting the remnants of Cadia, the psychic adepts gathered. One by one they reported the same phenomenon. Psychic corruption rates down by 32%, warp possession declining, voices from beyond growing faint. The senior astropath, ancient and blind, trembled. The warp grows still. The song of madness is quieting. A silence filled the chamber. And then one whispered, "Could it be salvation?" Another, shaking his head, "No, change, and change is never mercy." On Terra, the Custodes stood vigilant before the golden throne. The Emperor's light, still brilliant, now bore a faint outline of another energy, clean, stable, untouchable. The Emperor's psychic essence rippled faintly, a wave of fatigue. Deep within his divine prison, the Emperor's consciousness reached outward, touching the edges of reality that had shifted. He saw it clearly, infinity woven through the warp like threads of glass. "So, you have left your mark, Satoru. Even gone, you refuse to kneel." His mind thundered across eternity. Far beyond the Astronomicon's reach, Gojo reappeared, not in the same universe, beside it, a liminal place between realities. His body shimmered with residual light, his 6 eyes reflecting patterns that no longer belonged to just one cosmos. He breathed deeply. So that's what infinity looks like when it touches belief. He could feel it, the reverberation of every soul he had indirectly changed, the flicker of curiosity in a sister of battle's faith, the tremor of hesitation in a demon's madness, the faint, almost imperceptible shift in the Emperor's fire. "I didn't destroy it," he mused softly. I rewrote it." The Watcher of Threads materialized behind him, silent and calm. "You have undone both chaos and order. A galaxy without faith or madness is one balanced on the edge of oblivion." Gojo smiled faintly, tilting his head as if hearing some distant melody. Maybe balance was the point all along. He turned away from the Watcher, his voice carrying into eternity. "Tell the Emperor he's doing fine. I'll let the class handle itself from here." He walked forward, into light, into infinity, leaving only stillness behind. And across the galaxy, countless beings, human and otherwise, looked up into the stars and felt something new. Not fear, not faith, but the first faint shimmer of understanding. The tension builds. Subscribe to witness more tales from the Dark Millennium.
Time passed, if time still meant anything in a universe Gojo had touched. The Imperium rebuilt, as it always did, but something fundamental had changed. The Mechanicus found that machine spirits had become quiet, less temperamental. Tech priests reported systems operating beyond specification, guided not by prayer, but by precision. In Mars's crimson forges, Archmagos Lexim Phaeton stood before a dormant engine, reading through streams of data in perfect disbelief. No warp interference, no machine soul distortion. The omniscious will has been redefined. He turned to his aides. The old prayers, they no longer work. Instead of horror, he felt curiosity, an emotion long suppressed by ritual.
"Perhaps," he said softly, "faith is not function. Perhaps logic is devotion." In the halls of the ecclesiastiki, panic bloomed like wildfire. The sermons of zeal faltered, the saints' relics dimmed. Pilgrims gathered before shrines, demanding answers from silent statues. On Ophelia 7, the Cardinal Primus himself wept before a lifeless altar. "He promised eternity," the Cardinal cried. "The Emperor promised salvation." But as the cathedral's stained glass cracked, sunlight streamed through in a pure white blaze. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the light was not golden, not divine, just real. The warp had not died. It still swirled beyond the veil, but where once emotion raged like stormfire, now it rippled as tranquil reflection. The demons of Slanesh, deprived of ecstasy and agony, withered to shadows. The plagues of Nurgle decayed into harmless spores. Tsinch's labyrinths dissolved into still mirrors. Even Khorne's forges fell silent, his endless war drum reduced to one heartbeat, steady, human, finite. And deep within the immaterium, the Chaos Gods gathered, if they could still be called gods. Their forms flickered, uncertain, as though the concepts they embodied were slipping from memory. Tsinch hissed, "We are fading." Khorne roared, yet the sound produced no echo. Nurgle chuckled weakly, "All things must rot, even us." Slanesh merely sighed, "Or evolve." They looked to the great nothingness that Gojo had left in his wake, a void of perfect balance, a peace so absolute it frightened eternity itself. Inquisitor Valen watched the slow reshaping of reality unfold through countless reports. Psychers could now wield their powers without losing sanity. The Astra Telepathica could communicate across light years without demonic interference. Even the Astronomicon shone brighter, cleaner. Yet she felt unease gnawing at her soul. If chaos had been balance's enemy, what would balance require to sustain itself? If infinity endures, does it feed? Does it grow? Does it replace? On Terra, beneath the radiant corpse of the Emperor, something stirred. The Custode sensed it, subtle, steady, divine yet not divine. The Emperor's psychic field, once a raging sun, now resembled a serene horizon. The Emperor's consciousness was awake again, not fully, but differently. Within the throne, his awareness expanded beyond faith, beyond the warp. He could see through Gojo's lens. The universe was not merely divine or damned. It was measurable, calculable, infinitely precise. Infinity, his thought resonated through the warp, reaching beyond matter. You sought to teach, not to rule. And for the first time in millennia, the Emperor understood something not through faith, but through clarity. He smiled, a faint psychic gesture rippling through the Astronomicon. "Well done, Satoru Gojo." On the edge of the galaxy, within the endless black between stars, a fragment of light lingered. It shimmered faintly, a remnant of Gojo's presence, but it was not his consciousness, nor his power. It was something simpler, a memory bound in structure, not soul. A single phrase echoed from it. The strongest don't save the world. They give it the chance to save itself. And with that, the light dispersed, its particles spreading across the cosmos, embedding themselves into the quantum fabric of reality. Everywhere it touched, a subtle shift occurred. Precision, balance, insight. Across forge worlds, battlefields, shrines and warships, minds opened, not to gods, not to madness, but to truth. The watcher of threads, ever patient, ever silent, closed its eyes. The tapestry of the universe, once chaotic and blood-stained, now shimmered with quiet order. The warp storms had calmed. The empires still fought, but their wars had meaning again, finite, grounded, real. And so, infinity did not end the 41st millennium. It simply clarified it. But in some distant corner of the warp, where silence had not yet fully claimed dominion, a faint laughter echoed, half amusement, half defiance. The laughter of a man who once said, "You call yourselves gods, but you can't even grasp infinity?" And somewhere between reality and myth, Gojo Satoru opened one eye, just to see what his students were doing. The galaxy settled into its new equilibrium, if one could call it peace. The endless screaming that had haunted the edges of reality had quieted. The warp, once a realm of infinite hunger, now shimmered like calm water under a distant sun. But beneath that surface still lay depth. Stillness did not mean safety. The Imperium's fleets continued their endless patrols. Its soldiers still died by the millions. Humanity did not stop fighting. It merely fought with awareness. Inquisitor Valen stood aboard the solemn Aegis, watching the Astronomicon's renewed light shimmer through the void. Reports filled her data slate, miracles and disasters, intertwined as always. She whispered to herself, "Even with infinity beside us, we remain human." Behind her, an astropath approached. "Inquisitor, another message from Segmentum Pacificus. The Psychers report dreams of him." "Of Gojo?" "Yes, ma'am. The one-eyed spirit. He says, 'Keep your balance.' Then he's gone." She sighed. "He's becoming myth now." On Cadia's ruins, rebuilt not by time, but by will, a new fortress world rose. Its skies glowed cerulean, its air stable enough to breathe without filter. The old veterans who walked its soil claimed they could feel his presence in the ground itself. A training cadre of psychers gathered in a monastery carved into the mountain's bones. Their master, a thin, pale man with a single cloth covering his eyes, guided them. "Focus," he told them. "The warp no longer answers to madness. It listens to intent." A student raised her hand. "Master, is it true that one man reshaped reality?" The teacher smiled faintly. "Man? No. Teacher? Maybe. Catalyst? Certainly." She frowned. "And what happened to him?" Perhaps he found what he was looking for. Or perhaps he found a student worth leaving behind. Across the void, in the heart of the great rift, where the galaxy still bled light and shadow, an anomaly pulsed. A sphere of impossible calm, an eye in the storm. Ships that drifted too close vanished. Vox signals collapsed into static. Even the demons that prowled there recoiled in terror. They whispered of it as Gojo's scar. The Inquisition marked it forbidden. The Adeptus Mechanicus called it a heresy. But among rogue traders and navigators, it became legend. Some swore they saw a figure there, blue light tracing his outline, eyes like twin singularities. And when one bold crew attempted to send a message into the scar, they received only one single, crystalline reply. Infinity is not a weapon, it's a mirror. The Emperor himself remained on the golden throne as ever, but those who served near him swore his presence had changed. No longer a roaring psychic inferno, but something subtler, something aware. In the quiet hours of Terra's eternal dusk, the Custodes gathered in the Hall of Presence. Commander Trajan Valoris spoke softly, as though addressing the air itself. "My lord," he said, "the galaxy shifts. The warp obeys new rules. Are they your will?" A whisper, less voice than vibration, rippled through the hall. "It was never mine alone." The Custodes knelt, reverent yet uncertain. For the first time in ages, they did not know whether to worship or listen. And in that silence, perhaps the Emperor smiled again. The Mechanicus thrived. The Ecclesiarchy fractured. The Astartes, those eternal warriors, adapted. Some chapters, like the Ultramarines, embraced this balance, training librarians not as weapons, but as scientists of the soul. Others, like the Black Templars, raged against it, declaring the shift a blasphemy against divine fire. And civil wars flickered across the stars, not of faith versus heresy, but of understanding versus fear. And as the galaxy warred with itself once more, one could almost hear Gojo's laughter echo faintly across the cosmos. Balance isn't peace, it's motion. Still with us in the darkness? If this tale stirs your soul, like the video and share it with your fellow lore seekers. The galaxy may burn, but your engagement keeps the light of storytelling alive.
In the farthest depths of the galaxy, where light itself bends beneath the weight of the void, a presence stirred. Not Gojo, not truly, but what he represented. A ripple in reality, like the universe inhaling. The warp shimmered again, briefly, as though reconsidering what it was meant to be. And from that shimmer, a whisper drifted through the immaterium. The lesson was never to win. It was to see. The galaxy, brutal and endless, marched on. The Imperium endured. The Xenos schemed. The Tyranids consumed. Chaos slumbered, but never truly died. But somewhere in that infinite cycle, new possibilities bloomed. A guardsman facing the abyss might hold his rifle steadier. A magos might choose curiosity over ritual. A psyker might close his eyes and just for a moment understand what he truly touches when he reaches into the warp. Gojo's legacy was not salvation, it was clarity. And clarity in the 41st millennium was more terrifying than any god.
Because now humanity could see itself, flawed, brilliant, endless. As the last fragments of the anomaly dissolved into cosmic dust, one final image lingered in the void. A man in white and blue, blindfolded, hands in pockets, walking across a field of stars. He paused, turned slightly, one eye opening to reveal the universe reflected within it. I've taught enough for one lifetime. Let's see what they do next. The stars flared as though in response. Then the light faded, and the galaxy went on, darker, wiser, forever changed. Gojo Satoru had not conquered Warhammer's universe. He illuminated it. In a realm where gods devour souls and faith replaces science, he offered a glimpse of unfiltered truth, a world where power does not demand worship, only understanding. He did not defeat chaos, he reframed it. He did not save humanity, he gave it the choice to save itself. And that, in the 41st millennium, was the most dangerous act imaginable. Because in a galaxy built on blind devotion, the rarest miracle is self-awareness. Somewhere deep in the warp's quiet reflection, the chaos gods still murmur his name, not in hate, but in confusion. They cannot destroy what they cannot comprehend, and perhaps that is Gojo's final victory, not through strength, but through perception. For even the Emperor, the most powerful psyker to ever live, found himself changed by the idea of balance. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the faintest echo remains. See the world clearly. That's all it takes to change it. And so ends the tale of Gojo Satoru, the strongest man from another world who gazed into the warp and refused to blink.